All right, yeah, so we're here at Dave Asprey's Biohacking Conference in Austin, Texas. A lot of what we're talking about is definitely, everything that we're doing with Tru Kava is definitely centered around mental optimization, for sure. Clean, sober living and all that kind of stuff is embedded into it. But what really, really interests me the most is the significance of the time that we're living in, the cultural shift in mentality that's definitely happening. I think that we've lived in a culture that one of the identities that we've taken on, obviously, or one of the definitions or what the culture has primarily been defined in relation to our relationship with stress, trauma, adversity, and discomfort is one of toxic response or immediate gratification, or what I'd call toxic coping, right? It's a one-dimensional thing, obviously. We're kind of wired, our animal side's wired to move towards pleasure and away from pain. And a lot of that, we're trying to meet a lot of our basic human needs and run towards familiarity and comfort and all that stuff. But I think we're getting to a point where we're starting to realize that there's a higher road to take where we can actually access peak states or peak sustainable states of being that actually allow us to find meaning and fulfillment in our lives sustainably, instead of sort of moving and shifting our state just based on the seeking out of pleasure, right? Immediate pleasure.
I fully resonate with what you're saying.
Yeah.
A huge part of my life was about pleasure seeking and hedonism. And I think there's a beauty that you talked about and that we're experiencing here at the conference, where self-pleasure or self-care or self-love doesn't have to be looked at as this bad thing. It can actually be really healthy, really loving. But how to pragmatically and practically give that to us as human beings right now and not fall prey to doing so much that it pulls us out of our center and our core is, I think, what really inner hacking, I know we're at a biohacking conference, inner hacking or being connected to self is really what you're talking about. I think consciousness has been expanding for so long, and now we're at this inflection point with AI, with technology, with supplements and tools like Tru Kava that allow us to just honestly chill the F out and not be so drunk on our own brain and on our own intellectualism and try to just be everything outside of us, when really all the answers of peace, calmness, and centeredness that then allow us to use something like Tru Kava instead of alcohol puts us in a place where we can really just be comfortable in our own skin.
What was the single greatest aha, it could be instant or it could be over a period of time, long-term, mindset shift that transformed your relationship with discomfort, how you respond to discomfort?
It was cumulative. It was actually quite recently, but it's an amalgamation of 10 years. I've been in the game of podcasting 10 years. But really the biggest moment for me has been the realization that I'm a child of God, that I'm loved, that I don't need to do anything outside of just being Josh. And all the different things that got in the way of that, which was pornography addiction and the trappings of modernity that got its hooks in me, and that get its hooks in a lot of people, it's actually all just part of the game. It's part of the big theater that we're in here, where God's experiencing God's self in unlimited ways. I'm not a Christian per se, but the flesh and the desires are real. So how do we play in a world where we use healthy things from nature to give us thrill and joy and connection instead of the dark abyss that you and I have been into?
I truly believe that a huge part of the transformation that we're seeing right now in the culture, both individually and culturally, is all predicated on the principle of nature reintegration, right? What we're all seeking is being comfortable in our skin. We're seeking authenticity. I don't think there's any question that there is this underpinning hunger for authenticity. We're seeing it in the media space, why alternative media is booming. That authenticity actually is a hunger to return to our nature, because nature and authenticity are synonymous with each other,
so
right?
Good.
The opposite of, coping, with something would be obviously resilience. I see, resilience as the answer to things. Instead of trying to push problems away or responding to problems by trying to expand past them, essentially, right? And that comes through different forms of reintegrating ourselves with who we really are.
I love the reintegration because we've been so disconnected by the phones, by the tech. Which actually we can become the arbiter of the good. Technology isn't inherently bad. It's a tool. It's like a hammer.
It's about the consciousness that's behind the tool. What's so funny is that some of the greatest truths in reality and in the world and in our lives come packaged as cliches. And why do things become cliche?
That's right.
Because so many people resonate with them and they're so repeated over a long period of time that it starts to cheapen, because eventually people start to appropriate them and are not living the things that they're actually saying, and so then we form a negative association. And it starts to become cheesy,
Cheesy, exactly.
It's
cheesy equals
it loses its lesson.
Platitudes.
Right.
Platitudes like love is all there is, the emperor's not wearing clothes. Everyone knows this. But the significance of the truth gets so watered down, like you said, that these platitudes get posted on social media to say think positive, good vibes only. Tell good vibes only to an addict when they're deep in addiction. tell good vibes only to someone that's
cancer patient,
lost their son,
absolutely,
been through something medical, and see how that spiritual narcissism and that platitude actually works then.
Yeah.
But to live the platitude and make it a real, acknowledged, embodied truth, and transition it from a platitude, that's living. That's life.
Yeah.
This is why I love Tru Kava. I just had my daughter's birthday, and a couple of our buddies were over, and I had some Tru Kava in the cooler. And they were like, oh yes, because there's no alcohol there. I don't drink. You know, if you think about what alcohol really is, it's an icebreaker. Icebreaker means that you're so stiff and rigid that you can't just be yourself in a public setting without some you know, alcohol or drug to impregnate your nervous system, your neural tree, and really you lose part of yourself. I feel like the truth is you get the best of yourself when you're consuming things from nature that haven't been so altered by man.
Absolutely.
And that best of yourself shines through in social situations, at parties. And so if we can use things like kava and also even microdosing psychedelics and you know, there's so many
various
tools.
non-compound practices, you know,
or even non-compound practices, man. Like this is the juice. This is where we really start feeling alive and where we can just live our gifts.
Sobriety is a spectrum. In my talks, I show a lot of like Daniel Amen's brain scans or PET scans from our PET scan archives. We show brain imaging. Some that are actually like severely depleted brains coming out of like the throes of addiction or like that are seriously degenerated. And that's someone who's like crawling out of their skin, who's rocking in the corner. Those are like the extreme. So a lot of people think I'm not that, so I don't have a problem. But there's another scan, right? Just a scan that is sort of lightly lit. And that's really where most people in our culture actually sit, where we have depleted brains to a great degree. In other words, their brain isn't glowing like the optimized person on the right. The optimized person on the right would be equivalent to like your brain whenever it was 12 years old. Did you need artificial stimulation to have energy, focus, motivation, concentration, passion? Everything felt like an adventure. No, because you actually hadn't torn down your neurochemistry and gone down this sort of like what I call chemical credit cards that we use, right? You know, for like short-term adaptation to stress, meaning things that borrow from tomorrow's emotions to pay for today. Alcohol, drugs, borrowing from tomorrow's dopamine to pay for today, but another way of saying
well, the
emotions.
debt that's paid on that is quite severe.
Oh yeah, it's insane.
Like the compounding effect of serotonin and dopamine, especially people that are doing recreational drugs for a long time, that are like, let's be real, man, we're just looking for connection, we're looking for peak experiences. But you know what's been one of the most amazing ones for me? Breathing, breath work. It's a core pillar of what I teach. It's part of my life method. It's part of my talk today. I can see Tru Kava with breath. Tru Kava in nature. It's so funny. It's the roots. How amazing is that?
It's the fundamentals, man.
It's the distilled wisdom in the roots. Think about what's happening. Photosynthesis from the sun is coming and feeding this plant. Then it has its own unique biochemical signature. Then we're eating that, we're drinking that, consuming that. We're essentially consuming the sun. We're relaxing our nervous system, our neural tree, and we're doing it without something that's chemicalized.
What we're doing is we're infusing intelligence in various forms into our system that amplifies our collective intelligence as a living system's ability to self-regulate. Kava's unique adaptive identity as an organism is that of protection and expansion. I use 4 verbs to describe Kava. That's relax, expand, connect, create, right? And that's a continuum. It anchors the nervous system, and which allows you to then expand and integrate the 2 hemispheres of the brain, and then which allows you to better connect with the process of life around you and take part in the creative expansion process.
Cheers to creation.
That's essentially it,
Cheers to creation.
Well, that's what the indigenous people kind of saw it as too in Polynesia, is a developer of the mind and of the emotions. So that's the long play. In the immediate, it's mood, relaxation, mental clarity, and that's a great thing for people. But the thing about Kava is like, kind of what I was touching on earlier, like the average person today, that middle brain scan would be what I call the mundane brain, right? In other words, we think that sober sucks, or we think that the absence of artificial, aggressive chemical stimulation sucks, because we haven't learned how to press the right buttons to optimize and to actually build healthy neurochemistry and healthy emotional states from within that are sustainable. Ones that give us access to the full network and frame of our emotional and psychological capacity, right? So anyone who's actually been there, if I were to scan someone's brain who's like you or me now, obviously, that has seen, you know, something past that, we realize that there is a life beyond synthetic coping or toxic coping. We've learned how to press some of those buttons, and we feel more integrated and more human than we ever have.
That's my favorite word, man. Integration.
Absolutely.
Because think about what the etymology of that is. You're actually taking something that was part of the whole, and you're bringing it back to the whole. So both scientifically and spiritually, integration is about wholeness. It's about making the structure of the form factor solid and secure and safe.
Couldn't agree with you more.
Essentially, everything you've dropped about science I could just shine a spiritual lens on it and say,
absolutely, yeah.
We're just essentially seeking wholeness, and it doesn't come from getting drunk. It doesn't come from doing drugs. It comes from using tools or plant partners that can get us back to that place of wholeness. And it's a lifelong journey.
Yeah, and I'll say this as we start to kind of move this to a close here. One of the main principles that I teach as far as a diagnostic criteria to help us understand the place that we're at culturally and the place that we're at from a planetary standpoint. And I do think that it's important to understand the why and to understand the mentality that we're coming out of potentially. So we need to understand the mentality that's created all of this dysfunction and all the horrible mental health statistics and the isolation, the loneliness, the mental, the fragmentation and the degradation of our physical bodies and this disease epidemic that we've been in, right? But in the case of mental illness, from a diagnostic standpoint, I have the belief that it comes from one underlying syndrome. These aren't, 50 to 100 isolated chronic illnesses, autoimmune diseases, cancers, mental illnesses and stuff. It all comes from a syndrome that I call nature divorcement syndrome, right? Which is essentially degrees of separation from the foundational substrate network and intelligence that creates, sustains, and maintains all life. When we look at all the things that are causing dysfunction and disease, it's those degrees of separation, it's artificial environments, artificial light, artificial food, artificial this. That's what Maha is, right? You look in the mirror, you think that you're an individual. You're really a community of 70 trillion cells that are flying like a flock of birds together, right? And they're all connected into an intelligence field. And that intelligence is what we call God, universe, nature, Gaia, any of those things. If you cut your arm, it heals by itself. It's there regardless of what we call it. Whenever we develop technologies like, say, stem cells, for example, that capture intelligence and amplify it, those are good uses of technology. That sort of brings us back to things like Kava is capturing intelligence, right? And it's infusing it into the body in a way that can optimize the emotions long-term and sustainably, and to get you what you want on the front end, like with alcohol, but actually helps you to expand and to heal that neurochemistry physically, but also to help to integrate your mind to get past it mindset-wise too. So I would say that.
It's really beautiful. Thanks for having me, bro.
Thanks, man. Yeah. I love this. Let's do a longer one for sure, too.
Awesome.